I want to tell you something that changed everything for me. And I know it's going to change everything for you too. I discovered that money has ears. Now, I know that sounds absolutely wild, maybe even a little bit crazy, but stay with me because what I'm about to share with you is going to shift the way you see everything in your life. Money listens. Prosperity listens. The entire universe is waiting, literally waiting with bated breath, to hear what you're going to say next. And here's the thing that nobody tells you. The thing that I had to learn the hard way. The thing that kept me stuck for so many years until the light finally broke through. You've been talking to your money all along, but you've been using the wrong words. You've been speaking a language that pushes abundance away instead of calling it to you. You've been declaring poverty when you could have been declaring wealth. You've been affirming lack when you could have been affirming plenty. Let me take you back for just a moment. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, bills spread out in front of me like accusers, each one pointing its finger at me, telling me I wasn't enough, I didn't have enough, I would never have enough. And I was agreeing with them. That was the problem. Every single day I was speaking their language. I was saying things like, I can't afford this, I'm so broke, money just doesn't come to me, I'm not good with money, rich people are lucky and I'm not one of them. I was having full conversations with the universe, but every single word out of my mouth was an order for more poverty. And the universe, being the faithful servant that it is, said, yes ma'am, more poverty coming right up. Because here's what I finally understood. The universe doesn't judge your words. It doesn't say, oh, she doesn't really mean that, or, I know she's just worried so I'll give her the opposite of what she's saying. No. The universe is absolutely literal. It is the most obedient servant you will ever encounter. It takes your words as commands, as orders, as declarations of what you want to experience. When you say I'm broke, the universe says, your wish is my command. When you say I never have enough, the universe arranges circumstances to prove you right. But when I learned to change my words, when I learned to speak to my money like it was already mine, when I learned to call to prosperity like I was calling a beloved friend, everything shifted. And I mean everything, not just my bank account, though that changed too, but my entire experience of life, my confidence, my sense of possibility, the way opportunities started appearing out of nowhere, the way doors that had been locked for years suddenly swung wide open. And it all started with understanding this one simple truth. You are speaking to your reality every moment of every day, and your reality is listening, and it is responding, and it is giving you exactly what you're asking for with your words. Now, you might be thinking, but I've been trying to be positive. I say affirmations. I think good thoughts. Why isn't it working? And this is where most people get stuck, where they give up, where they decide this is all nonsense and go back to their old patterns. Because they're doing what I did in the beginning. They're saying the words, but they're not believing them. They're speaking one thing with their mouth and another thing with their heart. And let me tell you something that changed everything for me. Your subconscious mind, which is what actually creates your reality, doesn't listen to your words. It listens to your conviction. You can stand in front of a mirror and say, I am wealthy 1,000 times, but if underneath those words, there's a voice saying, yeah, right, not you, not with your history, not with your luck, then guess which instruction your subconscious follows, the one you actually believe, every single time. This is why people give up on affirmations. They're not lying to themselves incorrectly, they're trying to paint over rot, you understand? They're trying to plant seeds in concrete and wondering why nothing grows. Before you can speak a new reality into being, you have to prepare the ground. You have to clear out the old beliefs, the old stories, the old identities that are holding the patterns in place. And here's what nobody tells you. Those old beliefs? They're not even yours. Most of them were handed to you before you could talk. Money doesn't grow on trees. We're not that kind of family. People like us don't get those opportunities. You have to work hard for every penny. Rich. People are greedy. How many times did you hear variations of these before you were 10 years old? And every time you heard them, they sank a little deeper, until they became the operating system running in the background of your entire life. I remember the exact moment I realized I had been running someone else's programming. I was talking to a friend about a business opportunity, something that could have been really lucrative, and without even thinking I said, well, that sounds too good to be true. And it hit me. That was my mother's voice. Word for word. That was her favorite phrase, her automatic response to anything good, anything exciting, anything that might actually work out. too good to be true, and I had inherited it. I had been speaking that limitation over every opportunity that came my way for 30 years. So I started paying attention, really paying attention. Not just to what I was saying out loud, but to the running commentary in my head. The things I said casually, automatically, without thinking, and I was horrified. I can't afford that. That's just my luck. I'm so bad with money. Nothing ever works out for me. I always mess these things up, on and on. And on. This constant stream of negative declarations, speaking lack and limitation into existence with every breath. And the tricky thing is, these statements felt true. They felt like I was just being realistic, just acknowledging the facts of my situation. But here's what I learned. There's a massive difference between observing your current reality and declaring it permanent. One is neutral, factual. The other is creative, binding. When you say, I don't have enough money right now, that's an observation. When you say, I can't afford that, you're speaking a decree over your future. Do you see the difference? The moment you understand this difference, you begin to wield tremendous power. Because an observation is temporary, it's a snapshot of right now. But a decree? That's a command to the universe. That's molding the invisible substance of tomorrow. I want you to think about the last time you caught yourself saying, I can't afford this. Maybe it was a course you wanted to take. Maybe it was a beautiful coat in a shop window. Or perhaps it was something as simple as organic vegetables at the market. And you said those words, I can't afford it, almost automatically, didn't you? It rolled off your tongue like a reflex. But here's what actually happened in that moment. You weren't just acknowledging your current bank balance. You were training your subconscious mind. You were teaching it that lack is your identity. You were programming your future with limitation. Now imagine instead that you'd paused, taken a breath, and said something entirely different. That's not in my budget right now, but money flows to me easily and constantly. Or even simpler, I'm choosing to spend my money elsewhere at this moment, but abundance is always available to me. Do you feel how different that is? Can you sense how the energy shifts? The first statement closes doors. The second one leaves them wide open. The first one declares you are poor. The second one declares you're making a choice from a place of power. And the universe, that great law that's always listening, always responding, it doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't read your mind and think, oh, she didn't really mean that. No, it takes your word as law. It takes your spoken word and says, your wish is my command. That's why I'm so passionate about this. That's why I'll keep saying it until it sinks down into your bones. Your words are not passive, they're creative, they're alive, they're setting things in motion right this very moment. I knew a woman once who would end every conversation about money with, well, I'm always broke anyway. She said it with a laugh, like it was a joke, like it didn't mean anything. But month after month, year after year, she remained in that exact state. No matter how hard she worked, no matter how many extra hours she put in, she could never get ahead. Why? Because every single time she spoke those words, she was giving the universe a direct order. Keep me broke. This is who I am. This is what I expect. When I finally got her to stop, and I mean completely stop using that phrase, everything began to shift. It didn't happen overnight. The law never works like magic tricks. But within months, unexpected checks arrived. Old debts were forgiven. Opportunities appeared that hadn't been there before. Why? Because she stopped blocking her own good with her words. You see, the universe is a perfect mirror. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't punish you. It simply reflects back exactly what you're claiming as truth. When you claim poverty, it gives you poverty. When you claim abundance, it gives you abundance. It's that mechanical, that reliable, that absolute. So I'm asking you right now to become conscious, fiercely, ruthlessly conscious of what you're saying about money. Listen to yourself for just one day. Notice how many times you speak limitation. Notice how many times you use the language of lack without even realizing it. Because once you see it, you can change it, and once you change it, everything changes. Let me tell you something. I learned the hard way. The universe doesn't understand trying. It doesn't recognize hoping or wishing as commands. It only responds to assumption, to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. When you say, I'm trying to get out of debt, you're instructing the universe to keep you in a perpetual state of trying. The trying becomes the end, not the means. You're literally programming yourself to stay exactly where you are. I had a woman come to me once, absolutely drowning in financial problems. Every conversation we had, she would say, "I'm trying so hard to make ends meet." And I finally stopped her and said, "Stop trying. Start knowing." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. But here's what I explained to her. When you try, you're reinforcing the very thing you don't want. You're saying, "I am not this thing yet, and I'm struggling to become it." Every fiber of your being is vibrating at the frequency of lack, of not having, of distance from your desire. Instead, I taught her to say, "Money flows to me easily and constantly, not as a hope, not as a wish, as a statement of fact," as though she were simply describing the color of the sky. At first, she couldn't say it without laughing. It felt absurd to her. She'd look at her bank account and think, "This is ridiculous, I'm lying to myself." But I told her what I'm telling you now. You're not lying to yourself. You're telling yourself a different truth, a higher truth. The truth of what's possible, not the truth of what currently appears to be. Within 3 months, everything had shifted. A forgotten tax refund appeared. A freelance opportunity landed in her lap. Her employer suddenly restructured, and she received a raise she hadn't even asked for. Nothing dramatic happened, and yet everything changed. Because she stopped trying and started knowing. This is what people don't understand about manifestation. They think it's about forcing, about pushing, about making things happen through sheer will. But manifestation isn't forceful, it's effortless. It's the most natural thing in the world when you stop working against yourself. Think about breathing. You don't try to breathe. You don't hope you'll breathe, you just breathe. It happens. It's automatic. That's how manifestation works when you align your inner conversation with your desires. But most people are having the opposite conversation. They're saying, "I never have enough. Things are so expensive, I can't afford that. Money is tight, times are hard," and then they wonder why their circumstances never change. You want to know the secret that transformed my entire life? It's this. I stopped describing my problems and started describing my solutions. Instead of telling everyone about my struggles, I started speaking as though the struggle had already been resolved. Instead of complaining about what wasn't working, I gave thanks for what was already working, even if I had to look hard to find it. This doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you stop giving reality all your power. You stop bowing down to circumstances as though they're permanent, unchangeable, carved in stone. You begin to see circumstances for what they really are: temporary, passing, made of thought and energy, not granite. And here's the real shift. You stop asking the universe to change the circumstance. You start asking yourself to change your consciousness, because every outer condition is held in place by an inner conviction. If you're broke and you keep thinking, I'm broke, this is who I am," you're feeding the very thing you say you want to escape. You're watering a weed and wondering why it won't turn into a rose. But the very moment you shift your inner conversation, something in the invisible begins to move. I've seen it happen time and time again. A woman came to me once, absolutely paralyzed by fear. She was convinced she was going to lose her home. The bank was breathing down her neck. The letters were piling up. She showed them to me like evidence in a trial, and I said, "These letters are not your future, they're just paper." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. But I kept going. I said, "You've been speaking the language of loss for months. Every time you open your mouth, you rehearse the tragedy, and the universe is listening. It always is. It doesn't judge your words, it just matches them." So we started to work, not on her finances, on her mind. I had her stop talking about the loss. Stop telling the story of what was going wrong. I had her start affirming, not pretending, not lying, but declaring what was true in the invisible. My supply is infinite and immediate. I am under grace, and all my needs are met. The universe doesn't run out, and neither do I. At first, she could barely say the words without choking on them. That's how deep the fear had burrowed. But she kept going. Every morning, every night, in the mirror, in her car, walking down the street. And here's what happened within 2 weeks. An old debt she'd written off years ago was repaid. Out of nowhere. No warning. A check just showed up in the mail. Was it magic? No. It was law. The law of correspondence. As within, so without. She changed the inner conversation, and the outer world reshuffled itself to match. Now, I'm not saying you just sit on your couch and affirm your way into a mansion. This isn't about passivity, it's about alignment. When you change your inner state, you start to move differently. You make different choices. You see opportunities you were blind to before. Doors that were always there suddenly become visible. Because fear makes you contract. It makes you small, defensive, hoarding. But faith makes you expansive. It opens your hands, it opens your eyes, and the universe can only give you what you're open to receive. So when I say stop bowing to circumstances, I mean stop acting like they have the final word. They don't. You do. Your words spoken in faith, backed by feeling, repeated until it becomes your truth. That's what moves mountains. Not your worry, not your panic, not your endless analysis of what's going wrong. Your word. Your word is the most powerful technology you'll ever possess. Not your phone, not AI, not some productivity hack. Your word, spoken with conviction, aligned with the law, charged with faith. Let me tell you what happens when you actually use it. There was a woman who came to me in absolute financial ruin. Debt collectors calling. Eviction notice on the door. She wanted me to give her affirmations, techniques, 10 steps to manifest money fast. I said, no, you're going to speak one sentence, and you're going to mean it. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I told her, say this, Infinite Spirit, open the way for my immediate supply. Let all that is mine by divine right now reach me in great avalanches of abundance. She said it, weakly, like she was reading a grocery list. I said, again, but this time, say it like you're commanding the universe to rearrange itself, because you are. She said it again, stronger, again, and each time, something shifted in her voice, in her body, in the room. Within 3 days, she received a check in the mail. An old insurance policy she'd completely forgotten about. Enough to cover her rent and then some. Coincidence? No, correspondence. Your word doesn't beg, it doesn't plead. It doesn't negotiate with reality. It declares reality. Listen to me very carefully. Most people are using their words to describe their problems. You must use your words to decree your solution. There's a vast difference. When you say, I'm so broke, you're not just reporting a fact. You're speaking a command to your subconscious, to the universe, to every atom in your field. You're saying, more of this, please. When you say, I never get what I want, you've just placed an order with the universe. And the universe is a faithful waiter. It always brings exactly what you ordered. You think you're just venting, just being honest, just telling your friend what's really happening. But there's no such thing as just talking. Every word is a brick. You're either building a prison or a palace. And most people are building their prison one complaint at a time, then wondering why they feel so trapped. Here's what you do instead. You speak the word for what you want, not what you see. The woman who wants a relationship stops saying, I'm so alone. She starts saying, my perfect partner is now revealed to me under grace in a perfect way. The man who wants a new job stops saying, the economy is terrible, no one's hiring. He starts saying, Infinite Spirit, open the way for my right work, my right place, my right pay. You stop describing the problem and start declaring the solution. And I know what you're thinking. But Florence, that feels fake. That feels like I'm lying. No. What's fake is believing that your current circumstances are more real than God's promises. What's a lie is agreeing with lack when you're made in the image of infinite abundance. You think you're being honest by speaking your fear? You're being honest with the wrong thing. Be honest with the truth, instead the truth that you are one with infinite supply, infinite love, infinite power. Your word, spoken in alignment with this truth, becomes law in your life. Not sometimes. Not if you're lucky. Always. Because you're not trying to convince the universe of anything. You're reminding yourself of what's already true. And that brings me to something most people never talk about when it comes to affirmations: timing. Not the time of day you say them, though morning does set a powerful tone. I'm talking about the timing of manifestation itself. You see, we live in a world that worships the microwave. Instant coffee, 2-day shipping, 3-second reels. We've been trained to expect everything immediately, and when we turn to the spiritual laws, we bring that same impatience with us. We say our affirmation Monday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, we're checking our bank account, refreshing our email, wondering why nothing's changed yet. By Wednesday, we're discouraged. By Friday, we've decided affirmations don't work. But here's what I learned, and it changed everything. The universe doesn't operate on your schedule. It operates on divine timing, which is always, always perfect. Think of it like planting a garden. You don't dig up the seed every day to see if it's growing. You water it, you give it sunlight, you trust the process. And then one day, when the conditions are exactly right, it breaks through the soil. Your desire is the same way. Sometimes manifestation happens instantly. I've seen it, I've experienced it. You shift internally and the external world rearranges itself within hours. It's miraculous and it's real. But more often, there's a gestation period. Not because the universe is withholding from you, but because pieces are being moved into place that you can't see yet. People are being prepared. Circumstances are aligning. You yourself are being refined into the version of you that can hold what you're asking for. I remember a woman who came to me desperate for a new career. She'd been saying affirmations for months. My right work is revealed to me, but nothing was happening. She was still stuck in a job she hated, applications going nowhere, interviews fizzling out. She was ready to give up. It's not working, she told me. I asked her one question. Have you changed? She looked at me, confused. Since you started affirming, I said, have you changed? Have you learned anything? Met anyone? Been led to take any actions, even small ones? She thought about it. Well, yes, I took an online course I'd been putting off. I joined a networking group, even though I'm shy. I had coffee with someone who works in Dio, the field I want to enter. And you think none of that is the affirmation working? Her eyes widened. You see, we think manifestation looks like magic. One day you're here, the next day you're there, and nothing in between. But actually, manifestation is often a path that lights up one step at a time. The affirmation doesn't just change your circumstances, it changes you. It makes you brave enough to take the coffee meeting. Open enough to learn something new, aware enough to notice the opportunity when it appears. The waiting period isn't punishment, it's preparation. And here's the thing about divine timing, it's not just about you, it's about everyone and everything involved in your desire manifesting. If you're affirming for the perfect relationship, the universe isn't just preparing you, it's preparing them too. It's orchestrating circumstances so you meet at the right coffee shop, on the right day, when you're both ready. You can't rush that, but you can trust it. So when you say your affirmations and nothing seems to happen immediately, instead of spiraling into doubt, try this. Affirm the timing itself. Say, this or something better comes to me at the perfect time, in the perfect way. That little addition, the perfect time, takes so much pressure off. It allows you to relax into the process instead of white-knuckling your way through it. Because here's what I know for certain. If you remain faithful to the vision, if you keep affirming the truth regardless of appearances, it must manifest. It's law. Not because you deserve it or earned it, but because that's how consciousness works. That's the difference between begging and claiming. When you beg, you're operating from lack. When you claim, you're operating from law. I've watched people spend years in prayer, pleading with God to give them what they want, and nothing changes. Then they shift just 1 degree from asking to accepting, and suddenly the entire universe rearranges itself to accommodate their faith. You're not trying to get something from God. You're recognizing what already is in the spiritual realm and giving it permission to take form in the material world. This is why I always say, treat your desire as an already accomplished fact, not as something that might happen if you're good enough, not as something you're working toward, but as something that already exists, waiting for you to accept delivery. When you order something online, you don't spend the next 3 days wondering if the company will actually send it. You expect it. You know it's on its way. You might even start clearing space for it before it arrives. That's the consciousness that moves mountains. I knew a man once who needed $10,000 within a week. Now, by all appearances, this was impossible. He had no wealthy relatives, no obvious sources. Most people would have panicked, would have spent that week in anxiety and desperation. But he had been studying these principles, so instead, he simply said, "Infinite intelligence, reveal to me the perfect plan for receiving this $10,000 easily and effortlessly. I give thanks that it is already mine." Then he went about his day with an attitude of calm expectancy. 3 days later, a business associate he hadn't spoken to in over a year called him completely out of the blue. Said he'd been thinking about a project they'd discussed ages ago and wanted to move forward. Offered him exactly $10,000 as an advance. Coincidence? No. Consciousness externalizing as circumstance. The man's faith created a vacuum that the universe rushed to fill. His expectancy set forces in motion that his intellect knew nothing about. His willingness to trust the invisible orchestrated what his effort could never have arranged. And here's what most people miss. He didn't sit around visualizing that specific business associate calling. He didn't try to manipulate or control how it would happen. He simply held the consciousness of having and let divine intelligence handle the details. That's the art of non-resistance. The moment you start dictating exactly how your good must come, you limit the channels through which it can reach you. You might be looking at door number 1 while the universe is trying to deliver your package through door number 7. Your job is to maintain the inner conviction. God's job is to manage the logistics. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people block their own demonstrations by being too specific about the method. They want the money, but only from their employer. They want the relationship, but only with that particular person. They want the healing, but only through that specific treatment. And all the while, the universe has 12 other pathways open and ready, but their consciousness is too rigid to receive through an unexpected channel. This doesn't mean you don't have preferences. It means you hold your preferences lightly. You say, this or something better, in ways that are for the highest good of all concerned. That little phrase, this or something better, has saved more demonstrations than I can count. Because sometimes what you think you want is actually a limitation compared to what the universe is trying to give you. Sometimes you're asking for a bicycle when there's a car waiting. Sometimes you're praying for a job when there's a business opportunity knocking. Stay open, stay flexible. Stay anchored in the knowing that your good is finding you, even when you can't see the path. Because here's what I've learned. The universe doesn't just respond to your requests, it responds to your readiness. You can pray for the relationship, but if your heart is still barricaded behind walls of old hurt, love can't enter. You can affirm prosperity, but if you're secretly convinced you don't deserve abundance, your own consciousness blocks the flow. This is why inner work isn't optional. It's the prosperity malicious foundation. I've watched people sabotage their greatest blessings the moment they arrived, simply because they hadn't prepared the inner space to receive them. The job offer that comes with too much responsibility for someone who still doubts their worth. The relationship that triggers every unhealed wound the moment it gets real. The money that slips through the fingers of someone who never learned they were worthy of keeping it. The universe is always ready to give. The question is, are you ready to receive? And readiness isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing. Willing to release the stories that no longer serve you. Willing to forgive the past not because anyone deserves it, but because you deserve freedom. Willing to look at your patterns honestly and say, this isn't working, I'm ready to try something different. I remember a woman who came to me, desperate for financial relief. She'd been affirming abundance for months with no results. When I asked her to describe her current situation, every sentence was soaked in resentment. She resented her job, she resented her expenses, she resented people who had more than she did. How can the universe fill a cup that's already full of bitterness? I asked her. She went quiet. Then she began the real work, not just speaking new words, but cultivating a new feeling. She started with gratitude for what she had, even if it was small. She blessed her bills as she paid them, thanking them for the services they represented. She stopped comparing her journey to others and started honoring her own path. Within 2 months, an unexpected opportunity appeared. Not because the universe suddenly decided to answer her prayers, but because she had finally created the inner conditions that allowed the answer to reach her. This is the part they don't tell you about manifestation. It's not about manipulating external reality. It's about aligning your internal reality so completely with your desire that the external world has no choice but to reflect it back. You become the thing you're seeking. You want peace? You must become peaceful, even in chaos. You want love? You must become loving, even when you feel alone. You want abundance? You must cultivate the consciousness of abundance, even when your bank account says otherwise. This doesn't mean pretending. It means choosing. Every moment, you're choosing which reality you're feeding. The one you fear or the one you desire. The story of limitation or the story of infinite possibility. And I won't lie to you, some days, choosing faith feels like climbing a mountain in the dark. You can't see the top, you're not sure you're even on the right path. Every muscle in your body wants to turn back to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is suffering. But this is where warriors are made. Not in the moment of victory, but in the moment you choose to take one more step when everything in you wants to quit. The moment you speak the affirmation when your circumstances are screaming the opposite. The moment you choose trust over control, faith over fear, love over resentment, these are the moments that reshape your destiny. Because the universe isn't testing your perfection, it's testing your commitment. Can you hold the vision when nothing in the physical world supports it? Can you trust the invisible more than the visible? Can you believe in your good even when everyone around you thinks you're foolish? This is the narrow gate. Few find it, not because it's hidden, but because it requires something most people aren't willing to give: complete surrender of the old self. But here's the beautiful secret: the moment you step through that narrow gate, the moment you truly surrender your old, fearful self and claim your inheritance, something miraculous happens. The universe rushes to meet you. It's as if all of creation was simply waiting for you to take your place. I've watched this happen countless times. A woman comes to me, desperate, broke, relationship crumbling around her. She's tried everything the world suggests: more hustling, more compromising, more settling for less. Nothing works because she's been building on sand, on the consciousness of lack. Then, something shifts. Maybe she's so exhausted she finally lets go. Maybe she hears one statement of truth that pierces through all her fear. Whatever the catalyst, she begins to speak differently about herself and her life. Instead of "I can't afford this," she catches herself and says, "Infinite supply is my inheritance." Instead of "No one wants me," she declares, "I am divinely irresistible to my right and perfect partner." Instead of "I always fail," she affirms, "Every right action is effortlessly accomplished through me." At first, these statements feel like lies. Her bank account hasn't changed, her partner hasn't appeared, her circumstances look exactly the same. This is where most people turn back. They say, "See, it doesn't work, I'm just fooling myself." But she persists. Not through gritting her teeth and forcing herself to believe, but through a gentle, consistent return to truth. Every time fear speaks, she acknowledges it and then chooses a higher thought. Every time the old pattern tries to reassert itself, she responds with a statement of her divine inheritance. And gradually, sometimes suddenly, the outer world begins to shift. An unexpected check arrives. A friend mentions a perfect opportunity. She meets someone who sees her value. The very things she needed appear, often in ways she never could have orchestrated through her limited human planning. This isn't luck. This isn't coincidence. This is law. The law of consciousness manifesting. The law that states you cannot experience what you are not in consciousness aligned with. Your inheritance isn't something God is withholding until you're good enough, spiritual enough, deserving enough. Your inheritance already exists, complete and perfect in the invisible realm. The only question is whether your consciousness is a match for it. Think of it like a radio. All the stations are broadcasting simultaneously: jazz, classical, rock, news, static. You don't create the music by turning on your radio. The music already exists. Your radio simply tunes into the frequency you select. Your consciousness is that radio dial. When you're tuned to the frequency of lack, limitation, and fear, that's what you pick up and experience. When you tune to the frequency of abundance, wholeness, and divine inheritance, suddenly you pick up an entirely different broadcast, one that was there all along, waiting for you to tune in. The techniques I share aren't about manipulating God or the universe. They're about tuning your consciousness to what already is. Affirmations, denials, spiritual mind treatments, these are simply tools to shift your frequency, to align your inner radio with the station of your highest good. And here's what makes this so powerful. You don't have to have perfect faith all the time. You don't have to never feel fear or doubt. You simply have to return, again and again, to truth. The returning is the spiritual work. The returning is what builds your new consciousness. Some days you'll feel invincible, absolutely certain of your inheritance. Other days, you'll feel like you're making it all up, like you're a fool speaking words into empty air. Both days are part of the journey. What matters is not the feeling, but the practice, the gentle, persistent practice of claiming what is already yours. The consciousness that affirms does not beg. This is where so many stumble. They come to spiritual law with clenched fists and desperate hearts, pleading for change, negotiating with the universe like a merchant in a crowded bazaar. But affirmation is not negotiation. It is declaration. When you say, "I am surrounded by divine abundance," you are not asking for abundance to arrive. You are acknowledging what is already circulating in the invisible realm, drawing your attention to the spiritual fact before it becomes the material fact. Think of it this way. If someone handed you a check for $10,000, you wouldn't stand there begging them to give you $10,000. You would simply take the check, endorse it, and deposit it. The gift has been given. Your work is to accept it. This is the nature of affirmation. The universe has already written the check. Your words are the endorsement, your faith is the deposit slip. I once knew a woman who affirmed daily, "My perfect work manifests now in perfect ways." She had been unemployed for months, watching her savings dwindle, feeling the walls of limitation closing in. But she did not affirm from panic. She affirmed from recognition. She knew, somewhere deep in her consciousness, that her perfect work already existed. She wasn't creating it with her words. She was calling it forth, ringing the bell that would make it visible. Within 3 weeks, she received a letter. A former colleague, someone she hadn't spoken to in 2 years, reached out with an opportunity exactly suited to her skills, with compensation beyond what she had imagined. When she told me the story, she said something I've never forgotten. The job didn't come because of my affirmation. The job was always there. My affirmation changed me into someone who could receive it. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. Affirmations do not manipulate reality. They align you with reality. They shift your consciousness from the appearance to the truth, from the problem to the principle, from the lack to the supply that never runs dry. And here is another key. Affirmations must be specific enough to direct consciousness, but spacious enough to allow infinite intelligence to work. When you affirm, "I am guided to my right opportunity," you are not dictating the how or the when or the who. You are opening a channel. You are saying to life, "I trust you to deliver this in ways beyond my limited imagination." The moment you try to control every detail, you shut down the miraculous. You trade the infinite for the finite, the divine plan for your small plan. I have seen people affirm their way into marriages, into healings, into prosperity that seemed utterly impossible from where they stood. But every single one of them practiced this spaciousness. They held the vision without strangling it. They claimed the good without dictating its delivery method. Let me say this plainly. Your affirmation is not a spell. It is not magic words that bend the universe to your will. It is a recognition of what is already true in the spiritual realm, waiting only for your acceptance. When you affirm, "Infinite Spirit, open the way for my highest good," you are not informing God of your needs. God already knows. You are informing your own consciousness, training your mind to look beyond the rubble of appearances to the foundation of truth underneath. You are announcing to the universe that you are ready, that you are willing, that you have stepped out of the way. And the moment you truly step aside, your good rushes in like water through an opened floodgate. I knew a man who came to me in absolute desperation. His business had collapsed, his reputation was in tatters, and every door he knocked on slammed in his face. He was frantic, running from office to office, pleading, explaining, defending himself. And the harder he ran, the faster his circumstances deteriorated. I said to him, "You are blocking your own demonstration. Every time you defend yourself, you affirm the accusation. Every time you explain, you give power to the lie. Stop running, stop explaining, stand still, and watch the salvation of the Lord." He looked at me as though I'd asked him to jump off a cliff. But desperation is a powerful teacher. When you have exhausted every human avenue, you finally turn to the Divine One. He went home that night and spoke his word. "Infinite Spirit, I leave this entirely in your hands. My reputation, my business, my future, I release it all. Open the way for my highest good, and I will follow." Within 3 days, mark this. 3 days, a letter arrived from a former colleague he hadn't spoken to in years. The colleague had heard about his situation and wanted to offer him a position in a new venture. Not only was the position better than what he'd lost, but it came with complete restoration of his reputation because this colleague publicly vouched for his integrity. The man wept when he told me. "I stopped fighting," he said, "and the fight was won." That is the paradox the world will never understand. Victory comes not through force, but through surrender. Not surrender to circumstances, never that, but surrender to the divine plan, which is always bigger, always better, always more magnificent than anything you could have orchestrated yourself. You see, when you let go, you make room. When you release your grip on how things should unfold, the universe can surprise you with how things actually do unfold. Your human mind, clever as it is, can only see so far. It plots and plans based on past experience, on limited information, on fear dressed up as practicality. But Spirit sees the entire landscape. Spirit knows connections you don't know exist. Spirit can open doors you didn't even know were there. Your job is not to figure out the how. Your job is to claim the what, and then trust the universe to deliver the how. I cannot emphasize this enough. The how is none of your business. I have watched people sabotage their own demonstrations by obsessing over the how. But how will the money come? But how will I meet the right person? But how will this situation resolve? Stop it. Stop it right now. The how is God's department. Yours is simply to believe, to affirm, to remain expectant and open. When you plant a seed in the ground, do you dig it up every day to check if it's growing? Do you stand over it with a magnifying glass, demanding to see roots? Of course not. You water it, you give it sunlight, and you trust the intelligence within that seed to do what seeds do, grow into the fullness of their design. Your word is a seed. Once spoken into the fertile soil of faith, it must be left alone to germinate. Your constant worry, your endless questioning, your frantic digging, these are the very things that disturb the process. Trust is not passive. Trust is the most active, powerful force in the universe. When you trust, you align yourself with divine order. When you trust, you become a magnet for miracles. When you trust, you signal to the universe that you know who you are and whose you are. Trust is the bridge between your desire and its fulfillment. It's the invisible thread that connects your prayer to its answer. Without trust, you're like someone who plants a seed, then digs it up every day to see if it's growing. The very act of checking, of doubting, disrupts the natural process of manifestation. I've watched people sabotage their own demonstrations simply because they couldn't resist the temptation to worry. They'd make their perfect demand, release it to the universe, and then immediately start picking it apart with their fears. But what if it doesn't happen? But what if I'm not worthy? But what if the universe forgot about me? The universe never forgets. Divine intelligence is incapable of forgetting. When you make your demand known, when you speak your word with faith, it's already done in the spiritual realm. Your only job is to maintain the consciousness that allows it to manifest in the physical realm. This is why I tell my students, make your statement, then go about your life with joy and expectancy. Don't sit around wringing your hands, watching for signs, or testing the universe. That's like ordering a meal at a restaurant and then running into the kitchen every 2 minutes to supervise the chef. It delays your order and exhausts everyone involved. One woman came to me absolutely distraught about her financial situation. She had been affirming prosperity for months, she said, but nothing was changing. When I asked her to describe her daily thoughts, the truth emerged. She was affirming prosperity for 5 minutes in the morning, then spending the rest of her day in panic about bills, rehearsing poverty, and telling everyone who would listen how broke she was. You're ordering prosperity from the universe, I told her, and then immediately calling back to cancel your order. Your words after your affirmation are just as important as the affirmation itself. Actually, they're more important, because they reveal what you truly believe. She was shocked by this. She had thought that saying the words once was enough, that somehow those 5 minutes of affirmation should override the other 23 hours and 55 minutes of worry. That's not how consciousness works. The universe responds to your dominant mental attitude, not to the occasional positive thought you force yourself to think. So, she changed her approach. She continued her morning affirmation, but then she watched her words throughout the day. When someone asked how she was doing, instead of launching into a litany of financial woes, she simply said, "I'm watching my good come to me." When a bill arrived, instead of panicking, she said, "God is my unfailing supply, and large sums of money come to me quickly and easily." Within 3 weeks, she received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative she barely knew existed. The amount exactly covered her debts with plenty left over. When she called to tell me, she was laughing and crying at the same time. "It was there all along," she said. "I just had to stop blocking it with my words." Yes, it was there all along. Every good thing is already prepared for you. The banquet table is set, the gifts are wrapped. The miracles are queued up, waiting for your permission to enter your life. And what grants that permission? Your consciousness, your words, your unwavering trust that what God has promised, God will deliver. This doesn't mean you deny reality or pretend that challenges don't exist. It means you look beyond the appearance to the truth. When you see lack, You acknowledge the appearance, but deny it power over you. You say, "This is what appears to be, but it is not the truth of my being. The truth is that I am divinely supplied, and this appearance must give way to reality." This is not positive thinking covering up problems. This is spiritual recognition piercing through illusion. There's a profound difference. Positive thinking says, "Everything is fine," when it clearly isn't. Spiritual recognition says, "What I see with my physical eyes is only part of the story, and there is a greater reality operating beneath this appearance." You become like a spiritual detective, looking beyond the surface evidence to the deeper truth. When someone treats you unkindly, you don't just react to their behavior. You recognize that hurt people, that their actions come from their own pain and limitation, and you refuse to accept their judgment of you as truth. You see through the appearance to the divine spark within them that they've temporarily forgotten. When your body shows symptoms of illness, you don't ignore them foolishly. You take practical action. But simultaneously, you recognize that your body is always moving toward wholeness, that it has infinite intelligence guiding its healing, and that this temporary condition is not the final word on your health. You see the appearance, but you anchor yourself in the greater truth. This is where so many people stumble. They think spiritual principle means denying physical reality entirely, pretending nothing is wrong when everything appears to be falling apart. That's not wisdom, that's avoidance. True, spiritual understanding acknowledges what appears, while simultaneously knowing that appearances are always temporary and always subject to change through consciousness. I remember a woman whose marriage seemed to be crumbling. Every conversation with her husband ended in argument. Every interaction felt cold and distant. The appearance said, "This marriage is over." But she knew the principle. She stopped reacting to each argument as proof of failure. Instead, she began to recognize the truth. Divine love flows through this relationship. We are both seeking love in clumsy ways. Beneath these surface storms, there is a foundation of love that brought us together, and that love is still present. She didn't pretend the arguments weren't happening. She didn't spiritually bypass her feelings. But she stopped giving those appearances the final authority over her marriage. She stopped telling the story of her failing marriage to everyone she knew. She stopped rehearsing divorce in her mind. She recognized the appearance, denied it ultimate power, and held steady to a greater truth. Within months, something shifted. Her husband, feeling less judged and more seen, began to soften. Their conversations found new ground. The appearance that seemed so solid, "This marriage is ending," dissolved because she refused to accept it as the deepest truth. She looked beyond what was visible to what was possible. This is the work. You walk through your day encountering 1,000 appearances, the bank account that looks insufficient, the opportunity that hasn't materialized, the relationship that feels strained, the dream that seems delayed. Each appearance whispers, "This is reality. Accept it, settle for it, be limited by it." And each time, you have a choice. You can accept the appearance as final, or you can recognize it as temporary. You can give it all your emotional energy and mental attention, thereby feeding it and making it more solid, or you can acknowledge it while simultaneously declaring, "There is a greater truth operating here, and I align myself with that truth." When you choose recognition over reaction, something miraculous begins to happen. The appearances lose their grip on you. They may still be present, but they no longer control your emotional state or dictate your future. You become free, even in the midst of limitation. You carry an inner knowing that what you see is not all there is. This knowing transforms ordinary moments into sacred opportunities. You're standing in line at the grocery store, and suddenly you realize this is not wasted time. This is practice. Practice in maintaining your inner state regardless of outer circumstances. Practice in holding your vision while dealing with the mundane. The woman in front of you complaining about prices, she's giving you a chance to remain centered in abundance consciousness. The slow checkout? It's teaching you that rushing through life means rushing past your good. I once knew a woman who applied this principle while caring for an aging parent with dementia. Every day brought the same conversations, the same forgotten meals, the same accusations and confusions. She could have lived in resentment, in the prison of "this shouldn't be happening." Instead, she began to see each repetitive moment as sacred ground. "I am learning patience," she would affirm. "I am learning unconditional love. This situation is teaching me to be present without needing anything to change." The external circumstances remain challenging, but she became free within them. Her mother's condition didn't improve, but her own life expanded in compassion and grace. You see, the spiritual laws don't promise you'll never face difficulty. They promise you'll never face it alone, and you'll never face it without the tools to transform it. Every challenge is accompanied by its own solution, just as every lock is designed with its corresponding key. Your job is not to manufacture the key. Through struggle and strain, your job is to recognize it's already in your hand. This is why gratitude is so powerful. It's the recognition that the key is present. When you give thanks before you see the evidence, you're acknowledging the invisible supply. You're saying to the universe, I know you've already handled this. I'm not worried about the how. This isn't denial of your current situation. It's an elevated perspective that sees beyond it. Think of yourself as standing on different floors of a tall building. On the ground floor, all you see are obstacles, the walls, the barriers, the limitations immediately in front of you. But take the elevator up, and suddenly you see over those barriers. From the top floor, you see the whole landscape. The obstacles haven't disappeared, but you now see the paths around them, the solutions hidden when you were stuck at ground level. Your thoughts determine which floor you're living on. Low, fearful, resentful thoughts keep you in the basement where everything feels heavy and constricted. Elevated thoughts, faith, gratitude, love, vision lift you to the penthouse where the view is expansive. You're not trying to change what's on the ground. You're changing your vantage point, and from that new perspective, you receive new instructions, new ideas, new paths forward. This is what it means to have the mind of Christ, to think from the divine perspective rather than the human one. The human mind says, I'll believe it when I see it. The divine mind says, I'll see it because I believe it. The human mind calculates based on past evidence. The divine mind imagines based on infinite possibility. You're training yourself to think from this higher floor, even when your circumstances try to pull you back down. And here's the beautiful truth. The more you practice this elevated thinking, the more natural it becomes. What once required enormous effort eventually becomes your default setting. You rewire your consciousness. You create new grooves for your thoughts to flow through, and that's when something miraculous happens. The universe begins to respond not to your words, not to your desperate pleas, but to your state of being. You see, most people think manifestation is about speaking the right affirmations. They believe if they just say the words enough times, if they visualize hard enough, if they repeat their desires with enough intensity, the universe will finally hear them and deliver. But that's not how it works. The universe doesn't respond to what you're saying, it responds to what you are. You can say, I am prosperous, 10,000 times while vibrating at the frequency of lack, and nothing will change. The words bounce off the walls of your consciousness without penetrating. They're like seeds thrown on concrete. No matter how many you scatter, nothing will grow. But when you transform your inner state, when you genuinely shift your consciousness to prosperity, you don't even need the words anymore. Your entire being broadcasts a signal that the universe cannot ignore. I've watched this happen over and over. A woman came to me once, exhausted from affirmations. She had notebooks filled with them. Pages and pages of I am wealthy, I am abundant, money flows to me easily. She'd been writing them for 3 years. 3 years. And her financial situation hadn't budged. Why isn't it working? She asked me. I've done everything. I've said the words, I've visualized, I've made vision boards. What am I doing wrong? I looked at her and asked a simple question. When you say I am wealthy, do you believe it? She paused. Then, with heartbreaking honesty, she said, no. I feel like I'm lying. There it was. The disconnect. Her mouth was speaking one language, while her consciousness was speaking another. And the universe always responds to your consciousness, not your words. So we stopped the affirmations. We stopped the desperate visualization. We stopped all the techniques that were creating more resistance than results. Instead, we focused on one thing, finding the feeling. Not the words, not the images. The feeling. I asked her to remember a time when she felt secure, not rich necessarily, but secure, safe, provided for. She went back to her childhood, her grandmother's kitchen, the smell of bread baking, the warmth of the stove, the certainty that she was loved and cared for. That's the feeling. I told her, that's the frequency of provision. She started spending 5 minutes each morning, not affirming or visualizing, but simply dwelling in that feeling. Remembering that kitchen, that warmth, that sense of being provided for. Within 2 months, her entire financial picture had transformed. Not because she spoke different words, but because she became a different frequency. This is what people misunderstand about spiritual law. They think it's about technique. They collect methods like weapons, trying to find the one that will finally break through their circumstances. But spiritual law isn't a technique, it's a reality. You don't manipulate it. You align with it. Think of electricity. You don't convince electricity to flow. You don't affirm your way into having lights. You simply flip the switch and create the conditions for the current to move. Your consciousness is the switch. When you change your inner state, you complete the circuit. Energy that has always been available suddenly has a clear path to flow through. And here's what's so beautiful about this. Once you understand it, once you truly get it in your bones, manifestation stops feeling like work. It becomes natural. You stop trying to make things happen and start allowing them to happen. You relax into the flow of divine provision instead of swimming frantically against the current. You recognize that the universe isn't withholding from you. You are simply blocking your own good with fearful, limited thinking. When you shift into this new understanding, something miraculous begins to happen in your outer world. The very circumstances that seemed so solid and unchangeable start to rearrange themselves. People who blocked your path suddenly move aside. Opportunities that were invisible suddenly appear. Doors that were locked suddenly swing open. Not because you forced them, but because you stopped resisting the natural unfolding of your good. I've watched this transformation occur countless times. A woman came to me drowning in debt, frantically working multiple jobs, exhausted and depleted, yet the money never seemed enough. I told her, "You're not lacking money, you're lacking faith in your supply. The universe is abundant, but you're declaring scarcity with every worried thought." She began affirming daily, "God is my unfailing supply." Large sums of money come to me quickly and easily under grace in perfect ways. Within weeks, she received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative she barely knew existed. The money was there all along in the invisible realm, waiting for her consciousness to accept it. This is the law. You cannot receive what you do not accept in consciousness first. You cannot experience what you do not believe is possible for you. Your outer world is simply a reflection, a mirror, showing you what you've been holding in your inner world. When you look at your life and see lack, limitation, struggle, or disappointment, you're simply seeing your own thought patterns projected outward. And here's the liberating truth. If you created it with your thoughts, you can uncreate it with your thoughts. You are not a victim of your circumstances, you are the creator of them. Now, some people resist this teaching. They say, "But terrible things happen to good people. Surely they didn't cause that with their thinking." And I say to them, we live in a world of cause and effect, of thought and manifestation. Yes, there are collective consciousness patterns. Yes, there are larger karmic patterns at work, but your individual consciousness is always your point of power. You cannot control every circumstance, but you can always control your reaction, your interpretation, your inner state, and from that inner state you create your next moment and your next experience. The question isn't whether you have this power, you do. The question is whether you'll use it consciously or unconsciously. Most people go through life as unconscious creators, manifesting by default, wondering why the same painful patterns keep repeating. But you, by engaging with this teaching, are choosing to become a conscious creator. You're taking responsibility, not in a heavy, burdensome way, but in an empowering way. You're claiming your divine inheritance, your birthright as a spiritual being. And as you do this, as you align your thoughts with truth, as you speak your word with authority, as you release resistance and step into faith, you begin to experience what I call the joy of life without a burden. Life stops feeling like a struggle. Effort stops feeling like strain. Work stops feeling like drudgery. Everything becomes lighter, easier, more graceful. You move through your days with a quiet confidence, knowing that you are divinely guided, divinely protected, divinely supplied. You stop looking to people for your good and start looking to God. You stop trying to manipulate outcomes and start trusting the process. This doesn't mean you become passive or lazy. Far from it. You become more active, more inspired, more effective, but from a completely different energy. You act from inspiration rather than desperation. You move from clarity rather than confusion. You create from abundance rather than lack. And this shift changes everything about how you show up in the world. When you're aligned with divine supply, you don't chase, you attract. You don't force, you allow. You don't manipulate outcomes, you trust the process. I've watched this transformation happen countless times. A woman who was constantly anxious about money begins affirming her divine inheritance. Within weeks, her entire energy changes. Opportunities she never noticed before suddenly appear. People begin offering her exactly what she needs. Doors swing open that she didn't even know existed. Was the universe different? No. She was different. Her consciousness had shifted, and her world rearranged itself to match her new inner state. This is the mechanics of manifestation that most people miss. They think they need to work harder, network more, promote themselves louder, but divine supply operates on an entirely different frequency. It responds to your inner conviction, not your outer effort. When you truly know, not just believe, but know in your bones that you are divinely supported, that knowing radiates from you like light. And light attracts, it doesn't push or plead or convince. It simply shines, and everything that resonates with that frequency moves toward it. I want you to feel the relief of this truth right now. Take a breath and let it settle into your body. You don't have to figure out how the money will come. You don't have to control every variable. You don't have to have backup plans for your backup plans. Your only job is to align with the truth of infinite supply and then follow your inner guidance with courage. The universe has 1,000 ways to provide for you that your limited mind cannot conceive. Your rational thinking can only see the obvious paths, the job you already have, the clients you already know, the opportunities that already exist in your current awareness. But divine mind sees infinitely further. It sees connections you haven't made, people you haven't met, circumstances that haven't yet unfolded. It orchestrates synchronicities that your logical mind would dismiss as impossible. I remember a student who needed a specific amount of money by a specific date for a business investment that felt divinely guided. She didn't have the money, she didn't see any logical way to get it, but she affirmed daily, "The divine plan for my finances now manifests in perfect ways. What is mine by divine right comes to me effortlessly." She didn't worry, she didn't scheme. She simply held the vision and stayed open. 3 days before the deadline, she received a phone call from a lawyer. A distant relative she barely knew had passed away and left her an inheritance the exact amount she needed, down to the dollar. Coincidence? No. Consciousness. Her unwavering faith created a vibrational match to the manifestation of her need. The universe simply rearranged circumstances to deliver what she had claimed in consciousness. This is available to you right now. Not someday when you're more spiritual or more evolved. Right now, in this moment, with whatever challenge you're currently facing, the money you need exists. The resources you require are already present in the invisible. Your role is to claim them in consciousness, align your vibration with receiving them, and then act on the guidance you receive with absolute faith. No more playing small. No more settling for scraps when you're entitled to the feast. No more accepting limitation as your reality when abundance is your birthright. You are a child of the infinite. The same power that creates galaxies and orchestrates the perfect timing of seasons lives in you. That power doesn't struggle, it doesn't lack, it doesn't run out, and neither do you. Speak to your subconscious mind right now with authority. I am open and receptive to infinite divine supply. Money flows to me easily and constantly from expected and unexpected sources. I am worthy of prosperity. I accept my good now. Feel those words landing in your consciousness like seeds in fertile soil. They're already beginning to sprout, already beginning to reshape your reality from the inside out.